Hello, good evening. Thank you for being with us here in Las Vegas. I'm going to do a little cooking demonstration just to demonstrate some of the points of the Mediterranean diet that Dr. Harlan was talking about. And as we go through it, I'm going to talk a little bit just about both the medical and nutrition side as well as the culinary side to really tie it all together, because as we like to say, you don't talk to your patients about, buying a bag of carbohydrates or a pound of monounsaturated fats at the grocery store. You talk to them about things like chicken or, quinoa or beans. Even legumes might be a little advanced. So I want to talk about some ways to translate that into your kitchen, or help your patients translate that into their kitchens as well. And what I'm going to demo today is a black bean burger. And you might go, "Ooh, black bean burger, I'm not quite sure." If you've had a veggie burger before, my guess is it was something frozen from a box. So I'm here to encourage you to actually try making one at home. And I'm not going to tell you that you need to eat vegetarian. As Dr. Harlan said, you can have about 4 ounces of meat a day. And just to put that into perspective, that's about the size of the palm of your hand or a deck of playing cards. So I tell people usually maybe eat meat at one meal, or find ways to have smaller portions of meat in your meals throughout the day. And we talk about a lot of those strategies as in our classes, and when we do when we teach medical students as well as continuing medical education and for community members. But I also like to encourage people to try some vegetarian meals and learn ways to incorporate more flavor, texture, protein, and still feel satiated at the end of the meal, and not like they're missing the meat out of it. So we're going to do that with black bean burgers, and we're actually going to be trying them at the reception afterward as little sliders. I didn't make them in the kitchen. I'm sure they did a great job here, but it is my recipe, so I know it's a pretty good recipe. So I'm going to start here with some black beans. As Dr. Harlan said, we love legumes. And legumes are plants whose seeds grow in a protective pod. So it includes beans, peanuts, lentils. I really love lentils because they cook very quickly. Green beans, snap peas, and the like. So we're going to do some black beans. I would prefer the low sodium, which are much more widely available than they were even 5 years ago at the grocery store. Or you can cook your own, which is really, really cost effective and great for your patients. It's not that hard once they get used to it. It just takes some time and planning, and planning is a big piece of what we do. I like to mash the beans up a little bit. If you have a fork, that works well. You can also use a potato masher, and this just creates it so you have a little adhesive to hold everything together, and so it doesn't quite look so beany when you're putting it together in your burger. So just mash it before you add in the rest of your ingredients, and because you want the color from everything else that's going in there as well. If I were just to throw some black beans with some spices and an egg, it wouldn't look very appealing, one, but it also would taste just like it sounded, like beans. So I like to talk a lot about incorporating flavors with a lot of other vegetables, a lot of spices, some herbs, and get some color and texture in there as well. This could be kind of mushy if we just eat it by itself. So I put in our black beans, full of fiber, lots of iron, lots of protein, and I'm also going to add some nice red peppers. They add a great touch of color, also a little bit of sweetness in there. It's about half a red pepper. I'm also doing a half an onion that I chop nice and small. You want it nice and small because you don't want, if you do it too big, it won't cook well in the oven, and you'll get a big chunk of raw onion, which isn't very good. So knife cuts are very important, not just because they look better, but because of how it comes out when it's finished cooking, and you want them similarly cut. So here I got a little low-fat cheddar cheese. We're getting another point in our Mediterranean diet score. Cheese is great. I like incorporating it into the burger because a little bit goes a long way. It's shredded cheese. It gets mixed into the burger. With every bite, you get a little bit of that cheesy flavor going into it. And then I'm going to start actually, I'm going to add a little bit of garlic, and I figured it wouldn't be any fun if I didn't show you some knife skills to go away with today. And I know you have this nice camera on here so you can see it. If you watch Food Network, you've probably seen this a few times, but I'm here to tell you this is actually what chefs do when they peel garlic. The easiest way, this would be a clove. This is considered a head. I've had some people come to me a few times with a little confusion, a head versus a clove of garlic. Cloves are on a head of garlic. There's usually about 12 of them. And the easiest way to get that skin off of the garlic is to actually crush it with the side of your knife. This is a chef's knife. You should be using this for about 90% of the work you do in your kitchen. Having it sharp is really, really important, and learning the proper way to use it, but you'll find it's much more efficient. So you just take it and you crush the garlic with the side of it, with the palm of your hand. That loosens that skin off and makes it much easier than trying to peel it whole. There's also some good gadgets. I have nothing against if you'd like to do things like, I have one of those little tubes that you can roll to get the skin off. Those are nice. And if you, instead of chopping garlic, you prefer using a garlic press, that's fine. If you prefer buying whole peeled garlic, that's fine. But garlic is one of those things that adds a lot of flavor without any real added calories, nothing but benefit when it comes down to it. So after you get the skin off and get it off your cutting board, because you don't want those skins in your food, you can run your knife through the garlic and you can make a nice big pile of it. I then take the tip of my knife and I'm using it as a pivot from the top of my cutting board and taking the palm of my opposite hand, which is a counterbalance to it as I'm cutting, on the top of the blade. And you're just going to go back and forth right on that garlic until you get it in a uniform piece. If you like to use a lot of garlic at home, one of the things I do in my kitchen when we use a lot is I peel a bunch and I throw it in the food processor and I pulse it with a little bit of oil, and it'll store in your refrigerator for weeks. And makes it super simple to just reach for. One of those simple time savers you can do in the kitchen at home. So after you get your nice chopped garlic, again, 1 or 2 cloves for this is great. You want it all uniform size, again, so that it cooks evenly. You don't want a big chunk of raw garlic in there. Notice how I'm cleaning off the sides of my knife here and there just to make sure it's all there. And then I'm going to add this into my bowl. All right, so getting our nice burger. Now, I put a lot of veggies in there, and that's a lot of what we talk about when we're teaching these classes, is adding more vegetables into everything you do. Adding more vegetables and legumes. It's a way of lowering the energy density of what we're doing. So energy density obviously is how many calories a food has. And vegetables by nature are very low in calories, very high in water content. In addition, they have a lot of fiber. Fiber is satiating, extremely important to help us stay feeling full, not get hungry. And it also lowers the cost when we add a lot of veggies to dishes. We do this in our classroom we do this with spaghetti. So we cut out half the meat. We add mushrooms, which have a lot of umami. We'll talk more about that in our salt reduction presentation tomorrow. So they add a meaty, robust, savory flavor to our dish. The texture is similar to ground beef, so we don't feel like we're missing it. We've actually saved money as well as some of our health, increased fiber, decreased calories, but saving money by putting half that meat for a meal later. So incorporating vegetables into everything you make, whether it's rice, pasta, if it's a sandwich, is a simple tip you can do, or you can talk about with your patients in order to improve their health and save their pocket. So I'm going to add a few spices right now. It's really important to learn how to use different spices, because some may take only a little to add a lot of flavor. Some may take a lot to add a little flavor. We talk about the importance of measuring, both because things like salt, which I'll get to, can obviously have a large impact on your health, but also so you can start to understand the way the different herbs and spices work, so that you can start to get that cooked sense of what goes together and how much to add. This is cayenne pepper. And if you've ever made the mistake of adding too much cayenne, you know why I'm telling you this. It is really hot. I've had many times, if you add a 1/4 teaspoon of this would be too hot for most of you to eat. I'm just going to do a little pinch, and it's just going to add a little bit of heat in the back of my throat, but not so that it's overbearing to anyone. On the other hand, here's cumin. I love cumin. It's that taco seasoning smell when you think of that we put on tacos. You need a good amount of cumin in order to really get the flavor. I need a tablespoon of this cumin in there. So you see the difference between this and my cayenne pepper, but you have to start following recipes and learning how to use them properly in order to understand that. Here I have dried oregano. You can also use fresh herbs here. Oregano is one of those things I really love that also is kind of mellow in the background, makes me think of that Mexican flavor. I'm going to add a teaspoon of dried oregano. If you want to use something like fresh herbs, generally the rule is to do a third the amount of dried as you do fresh. So if you're doing 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, you would do 3 teaspoons of fresh oregano. So I'm going to do a teaspoon of that. And then I'm going to add my salt. Now, you're only supposed to get, for a healthy individual that is not African American and under the age of 50, about 2,400 milligrams of salt a day, about 2,300 milligrams of salt a day. That's equivalent to 1 teaspoon, which I have in my hand. That's not a lot of salt. Now, that doesn't mean you should be scared if you add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to a recipe, because chances are that's feeding 4 to 6 people. But you need to be very cognizant of how much salt you're adding to your dishes. About 70% of our sodium comes from processed foods, but by cooking at home, but by taking the steps to make sure we don't eat too much salt at home, we can greatly improve our health. So in this recipe, it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm also getting some sodium from the cheese, keep in mind, as well as the beans, so that adds a little of the salty flavor profile. To that, I'm going to add an egg. This is going to help bind it together. This also adds a lot of nice protein, contrary to belief about 10 years ago. Really shouldn't impact most of us, our cholesterol at all. And I'm going to add some breadcrumbs to help bind it. It's just like when you think of meatloaf, how you would bind meatloaf is how we will do it here. So I'm going to mix this together a little bit first. Nice colorful mix. And then I'm going to add in our breadcrumbs to bring it all together. And, you know, sometimes the ingredients might be a little more watery than others, and you might have to adjust the breadcrumbs until you can form it into a ball, because vegetables don't come mostly from a factory, I'd say. So I'm just going to mix this. I did whole wheat breadcrumbs, by the way. Another simple way you can add a point to your Mediterranean diet score is by switching from things like white bread to whole wheat bread, but that also includes your breadcrumbs. If you ever have bread that's getting old, it's a good way to use it up. You can let it dry out a little, dry it in your oven, and then just put it in a food processor to make your own breadcrumbs. So you can see how this forms in a nice ball in my hand. That means it's ready, right? That's good for me. Let me get these out of my way. And this makes about 6 burgers. If you have a scale, that's a great way to do it. But otherwise, just divide it into 6 balls, form it in a ball, push it. You really want to compact it together. So this is a good way for you to form your burgers at home as well, so they don't fall apart so much. Make it a nice ball, then flatten it with the palm of your hand, and then work on shaping it from there. And it kind of looks like a burger. That color from the beans itself, and you'll see it cooked in a moment, makes you think you're eating a burger. Now, if you really want the meat in your diet, try doing some of these concepts with your burgers at home. Saute some veggies and throw them in your burgers at home to build up some of that flavor, lower your caloric density rather than relying just on straight beef. Okay, so we have the nice little burgers. You put them on your tray, you put them in the oven at about 350 and bake them for 15-20 minutes, and voila, you have your veggie burgers. I like these because you can make them in advance, freeze them, and have a really quick dinner or lunch or even snack in some cases. And through the power of being on stage, because I don't have an oven, here's what it looks like when it's done. So you can see this burger, it actually kind of looks like a hamburger, and it's very satiating, and we built a lot of flavor in there, measured our salts, didn't rely just on things like fat and salt for a great dish. So these are some of the concepts we teach, and I hope you enjoy it afterward. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Harlan, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.